elections, they really shine a light on certain issues. This time around, it's like immigration, right?
Yeah.
Front and center, especially with how Trump's framing it in this campaign.
Mm-hmm.
We've been digging into this news article, and it really gets you thinking about how politicians use this to connect with voters.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
It's something.
it's a lot,
Yeah, it's a pattern we've seen before, right?
sadly. I mean, when you've got a complex issue like immigration is, it's like
Yeah.
easy to frame it in a way that, taps into these deep-seated fears, anxieties.
Okay, so unpack that a little.
Sure.
The article starts off strong. Trump's core message, basically, the U.S. is being overrun. He uses terms like invasion, illegal migrant criminal networks.
Wow.
Even goes as far as saying they're destroying the country.
Yeah. It's
Right.
strong language and sadly, like I was saying, not a new tactic either.
Right?
This whole linking immigration to crime and like the downfall of society,
Yeah.
it's been a go-to for political campaigns, I mean, globally,
Right.
forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it often works because it triggers that emotional response,
Yeah.
that urge to be like, we got to do something drastic right now.
Right.
The downside is it really oversimplifies a really complicated issue.
Totally.
And it can like really easily fuel prejudice and discrimination.
And it's not just like he's speaking in general terms either.
Right.
The article highlights this rally he did in Aurora, Colorado,
Oh, yeah.
where he uses this really hyper-local example, this
Huh.
Venezuelan gang called Tren de Aragua,
Yeah.
claims they're like invading and conquering the city. So is this a case of making it hit closer to home, even if, embellishing the facts a bit?
Ah, the Aurora case.
Yeah.
It's like a textbook example of using a narrative that really lands even if it doesn't quite
Right.
match up with reality.
Right.
Local officials in Aurora, like on both sides,
Yeah.
have said publicly that Trump's claims are way exaggerated, even totally false.
So why even go there? Like, if it's so easily debunked, why not just focus on something else? Because sometimes it's not about the accuracy, It's about crafting a narrative that really hits home emotionally with a specific audience. And when you use a local example, even if it's amplified or like taken out of context,
Yeah.
it makes the issue feel immediate,
Right.
urgent, like it's happening in your backyard, to use that
Right.
loaded phrase,
Yeah. So it's like using fear to kind of bypass logic,
Yeah.
making people more susceptible to those us versus them arguments.
Exactly. And it makes critical thinking even more important, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Especially in like an election cycle where information, whether it's true or not, spreads so fast.
It's true. And what's really got me wondering? The article mentioned this. So polls are showing that Trump might be losing ground on economic issues,
Okay.
but immigration, border security, he's still polling strong.
Interesting.
It's almost like a strategic shift is happening.
That's a really good observation.
Yeah.
And it really makes you think about campaign strategy, doesn't it? Like, could it be that he's leaning into immigration intentionally, even making it seem like a bigger deal than inflation?
Right.
Because he knows that's where he's stronger.
Which is a bold move considering how many voters are worried about their wallets right now.
For sure.
So are we talking about two separate issues, or are they more related than we realize? Is it even accurate to frame them as like competing priorities?
That's what's so fascinating about this election right now.
Yeah.
You've got these real-life concerns like the economy,
Yeah.
but they get tied to these emotionally charged issues like immigration.
Right.
It'll be so interesting to see how this plays out as we get closer to November.
And it's not even just a strategy, it's like the actual language.
Yeah.
This article gives some really stark examples. He calls immigrants savage criminals, animals.
Wow.
He even says they're poisoning the blood of our country.
Yeah.
I mean, those are
It's
fighting words.
It's definitely inflammatory, and like it's worth really thinking about the impact of that kind of dehumanizing language. When you take away someone's humanity, reduce them to labels that just make people scared or disgusted, it creates a toxic environment.
It's like you can't even have a real conversation at that point.
Exactly. Having like actual nuanced policy discussions is almost impossible when, one side is going for the gut, not the brain.
Right.
This kind of language, it's like it pushes those fight or flight buttons in our brains,
Yeah.
Makes it hard to think critically or even just empathize with people who are different from us.
So do you think this is actually effective in like winning over undecided voters, or is it more about rallying his base?
Probably a little both. I mean, at this point, keeping his base energized is key, right?
Yeah.
And this kind of rhetoric is familiar. It's been a theme his whole political career.
Sure.
But it's also a way to kind of control the conversation, you know?
Yeah.
Makes his opponents react to his stuff instead of setting their own agenda.
And it's not just the strong language. The article points out he uses statistics claims about immigration that are, well, let's just say they don't exactly hold up.
Right.
Like immigrants stealing jobs or driving up housing costs.
Classic.
We've heard it all before.
Yeah, and that's where you really need those media literacy skills.
Right.
Especially now with everyone being so overloaded with information.
It's true.
It's hard to know what's real anymore.
It
You
is.
can't just skim headlines or scroll through social media.
So how do we get better at this? Like, what are some red flags to watch out for?
Well, first look at who's saying it.
Okay.
Is it a legit news source? Researchers? Or some blog with an agenda?
Right.
Another thing is watch out for super emotional language or images. Does it make you angry, scared?
Yeah.
Those feelings are valid, but they can also cloud your judgment. You got to take a step back, breathe, and just ask, what are they trying to get me to think? And do they have the proof?
It's like we need to become our own fact checkers, especially since those algorithms are always feeding us stuff we already agree with.
Totally.
Have you ever come across some claim about immigration
Yeah.
and just been like, hold on, is this even true? How do you actually check that stuff?
All the time. One of the best things you can do is just look for info from different sources.
Yeah.
If you're seeing the same exact thing word for word all over, especially on places with a clear bias, that's a red flag.
Makes sense.
Look for perspectives from different sides of the aisle. Check those fact-checking websites and be careful with anything that seems too good to be true, you know?
Or
Yep.
way too sensational.
It's a good reminder that we all have a responsibility to be informed.
Right.
Especially with something as big and complicated as immigration. This article, though, it doesn't just point out the problems. It kind of hints at how other candidates are dealing with this, too.
It's almost like a little bit of hope. It's been heavy, right? This whole way Trump's framing this.
Yeah.
It's like he wants us to either agree with all this extreme language or just check out completely.
It's that classic populist move, right? Us versus them. Like, the issues are simple black and white choices.
Right.
But really, most people are somewhere in the middle. And they want solutions, not just someone yelling at them.
Exactly. And that's what makes this article so interesting. It shows how bad the rhetoric is, but then it also kind of points out how other candidates are approaching immigration.
Right.
It's refreshing, honestly.
It's good to remember there are other ways to do this, even if they don't make the news as much.
Right.
Some candidates are talking about, real immigration reform. Border security, sure, but also those visa backlogs, and what about the undocumented immigrants already here working? How do we give them a path to citizenship?
It's like they're actually trying to deal with the whole thing instead of using it as a weapon.
Yeah.
But does that even work? Do voters respond to that when there's so much noise already?
That is the million-dollar question. How do you cut through all that and connect with people who are drowning in information?
It's got to be tough.
It's hard, but I think it starts with reminding people that there are real stories behind all this.
Oh, absolutely.
Statistics and speeches aside, we're talking about families and their hopes and dreams, their struggles.
It's about remembering we're all human.
Exactly. And if listeners take away one thing from this, I hope it's that.
I love that. So next time we see this issue pop up, whether it's the news or social media or even talking with friends and family, we should all just take a second.
Take a breath.
Yeah, just breathe and ask ourselves, am I really seeing the whole picture here? Am I actually listening with an open mind?
So important.
This has been great. Thanks for diving into this with me. Immigration politics, public perception, the whole thing.
It's a lot.
It's a conversation that's not going away anytime soon. But hopefully this has given everyone some things to think about and maybe inspired you to stay informed, stay engaged, and stay curious.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.